Hey everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Mark here, ready to dive into the wild world of AI with the one and only Jenny.
And Jenny here, still trying to figure out if my toaster is spying on me. Kidding! Mostly. We've got a packed episode today, number 206, looking at some of the big players in the AI investment space.
That's right. We're talking chips, we're talking data, we're talking, well, where the money is actually flowing in this AI evolution.
And it's been a fascinating few months. We've seen some interesting market moves, like NVIDIA and Palantir, two names sort of synonymous with AI right now, have had quite different performance this year.
Oh man, yeah. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. So NVIDIA, after just crushing it, their stock actually saw a bit of a dip recently. Down around 15.1% at one point.
Which feels almost counterintuitive, right? Given how much their chips are powering pretty much everything happening with AI.
You'd think. But there are definitely factors at play. Maybe things like tariff concerns. Maybe hitting them a bit harder because they're so heavily involved in the hardware side of things.
Okay, that makes sense. So while the demand for their tech is through the roof, and we know it is, especially with these huge cloud companies pouring billions into AI data centers, other things can still affect their performance. 5.
Exactly. And speaking of demand, cloud providers like Microsoft, Amazon, they're massive players here. They're the ones buying up tons of these high-end GPUs to build out their AI infrastructure.
Right, like that reported $250 billion spending by cloud companies on these data centers. That's a huge pie, and NVIDIA is getting a big slice of that.
They are. They still hold around 80% of the GPU market share, which is just wild when you think about it. 5.
80%? Wow. And a big part of that is their CUDA platform, right? That software ecosystem they built that just makes it easier for developers to work with their chips.
Oh man, that is the crucial part. CUDA is a massive advantage for them. It's not just having powerful hardware, it's having the tools that make it easy to use that hardware for these really complex AI tasks.
And that's where competitors like AMD have struggled a bit, even though they have good hardware. Building that kind of robust software ecosystem, it takes time and a ton of investment.
It does. Their ROCm platform is trying to catch up, but CUDA just has such a head start and so much developer support already built in.
So we've got NVIDIA, massive in hardware, powering the cloud giants. But then we have Palantir, which has had a different story this year in terms of their stock performance.
Yeah, Palantir is fascinating because they're not a chip company. They're a software and data analytics company, heavily focused on AI applications. And they've seen a gain of around 21.5% this year. Quite a different trajectory.
That's a pretty significant difference compared to NVIDIA's recent dip. What's driving that for Palantir?
A lot of it seems to be their artificial intelligence platform, or AIP. They're seeing real traction and adoption with it in the market.
Okay, tell me more about AIP. What exactly does it do?
Think of it as a platform that helps companies and governments actually deploy AI models into their operations. It helps them make sense of massive amounts of data and then use AI for more informed decision-making. 5. It's like bridging the gap between the AI model and real-world application.
So it's less about the raw computing power and more about applying AI in practical ways for businesses?
Exactly. And they've had some good results there. Their customer base expanded by 43% in the fourth quarter, which is a pretty strong sign that companies are actively adopting this platform. People are figuring out how to do AI with Palantir.
That's a strong growth number. It seems like there's a real need for platforms that can help businesses actually use AI effectively, not just have access to the compute power.
Completely. And while we hear reports about Microsoft scaling back some types of data center investments, which could potentially affect chip demand short-term in specific areas, Amazon seems to be stepping up its game in that area, especially with their AWS cloud services tailored for high-performance computing and AI, almost balancing things out.
It just shows how dynamic this market is. You have the hardware giants, the cloud providers building the infrastructure, and the software platforms like Palantir, all playing different but interconnected roles in this ecosystem.
Absolutely. And the future prospects are looking pretty bright across the board, even with the market fluctuations we see now and then. The spending on AI data centers is only expected to increase. And companies like NVIDIA have new, powerful chips like Blackwell coming out that cloud providers are already lining up for.
And Palantir's AI platform is expanding more into the private sector, which opens up a whole new set of possibilities and revenue streams for them.
It does. It's fascinating to watch these different pieces of the AI ecosystem evolve and interact. It's not just about one company or one technology. It's about this whole interconnected web of innovation.
Yes. And thinking about that interconnectedness, it makes you consider potential challenges too, like, what about the environmental impact of all this? All that computing power has to have an effect, right?
That's a great point, Jenny. The production and disposal of these high-performance chips and hardware, it's not insignificant. And the energy consumption of these massive data centers, it's considerable. That definitely has to be part of the conversation when we talk about sustained AI investment.
Right. And as investors think about where to put their money, sustainability is becoming a bigger factor. Are they backing companies that are thinking about this environmental footprint?
Absolutely. It's not just about the return on investment anymore. There's a growing awareness of the broader impact. And speaking of challenges, could we see a point where the AI market becomes saturated?
That's a valid concern. As more and more companies jump into AI, you have to wonder if the demand for certain technologies will peak and level off. Maybe making investors look for diversification beyond just the hardware providers.
Yeah, that diversification point is key. And then you have potential regulatory challenges looming. Governments around the world are starting to wrap their heads around how to regulate AI, especially in areas like data analytics, which affects companies like Palantir directly.
True. Regulations could impact how companies operate, how they use data, which in turn could affect their profitability and how attractive they are to investors. 5. That adds another layer of complexity to the investment landscape.
It certainly does. And for software companies like Palantir, while their platform is powerful, they still rely on the underlying hardware to perform. What happens if there are disruptions in hardware availability, or if the quality isn't there?
That's a good point. A software platform, no matter how good, still needs a robust foundations. So while Palantir's AIP is impressive, its performance is tied, to some extent, to the capabilities and availability of the hardware it runs on. It's a delicate balance.
It really highlights that investing in AI isn't just about picking the chip company or the software company. It's about understanding the different layers of the technology, the potential risks, and how they all fit together and influence each other.
Definitely. It's a complex picture, but incredibly exciting to follow, both from a technological and an investment perspective.
Well said, Jenny. It keeps things interesting, that's for sure.
It really does. All right, I think that's a good place to wrap up for today. Thanks for breaking down some of the nuances of these AMI powerhouses and the broader market, Mark.
My pleasure. Always fun to nerd out about this stuff with you. And a huge thanks to our listeners for tuning in to episode 206. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. Maybe we'll tackle the environmental impact of AI in more detail?
Ooh, good idea. And if you have questions about AI or anything else we discussed today, reach out. We love hearing from you. Until next time.
See ya.